this appeal. What are the grounds of the appeal?
There's three specific grounds that they're looking at, as you just mentioned. First of all, they would like the recusal of two of the arbitrators who took part in the decision that that we eventually heard the result of on the 1st of May. And that's significant because the decision from CAS came as a 2-1 majority. So the two people they're asking to be recused are the two of that 2-1 majority. The other person voted in favour of CASTA, essentially. So that's fairly important. Second of all, they're looking at the legal and medical grounds. The government put together a fairly high-level team to look at the decision that the Court of Arbitration for Sport made. And they have come to the conclusion that it's not defensible either on medical or legal grounds. They say, and the word they use is inconceivable, that this result could have been reached given the evidence that was presented before them. That's the second one. And then the third one is the consideration that they think wasn't taken as far as how to implement this decision is concerned. It's a very difficult one to implement because although it seems fairly simple, the athletes are affected, need to take medication in order to lower their testosterone below a certain level. It's not simple because the medication that they would need to take has never been used for that purpose. So it's a very difficult decision, first of all, for athletes to make. The World Medical Council has already instructed its members not to issue this medication for that purpose.
Yes.
So it's going to be a fairly complicated thing for them to do.
What are your thoughts around some people arguing that this decision by the IAAF is similar to a rule being made that somebody who's playing basketball and is 7 foot tall shouldn't participate? Is it really that simplistic?
It's not really that simplistic. It's a fairly common one, and the Michael Phelps argument is the one that's put out all the time because he has extraordinarily long arms and he also has different levels of lactic acid that his body naturally produces. There's elements of truth within that argument, but where it becomes complicated is that somebody who's extra tall in basketball doesn't have anywhere else to go. In all sport, with the exception of equestrian, men and women do not compete on the same stage. Equestrian is the only sport in the world where men and women compete equally against each other. And to some extent now, the motorsport has come into it. People who are driving, women are starting to come into motorsport.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is that, which means that a line has to be drawn somewhere. And you know, in the 21st century, that line has become a little bit more complicated.
Yes.
So you can't blame anybody for having to draw that line, but it's where that line, the feeling is that the IAAF is drawing that line fairly arbitrarily and without sufficient cause, without sufficient scientific background to what they're actually trying to do.
Objectivity is obviously critical in this particular situation, but obviously we as South Africans, we're very emotional and we're voting for CASTA, and we know that the South African government has been very pro-CASTA. What are they doing?
They are taking quite a lot of steps, actually. They've kind of driven this whole process and the fight all along, and have supported ASA, who have been the ones who've actually had to launch first the original appeal to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, and now the one that goes to the Swiss Federal Court. They're also going to approach the United Nations, as you mentioned earlier, and that's been a theme all the way through, that what the IAAF are asking to do is a human rights violation. There have been quite a few statements from various organizations and human rights organizations around the world over the last year or so, since this has really come to the forefront, saying that this is a direct violation of human rights of all of the women involved and not just CASTA. They're also supporting a petition that Athletics South Africa are putting together, where they are trying to get as many national athletics associations as possible to sign a petition asking for two things. First of all, to ask the IAAF to rescind these regulations, which are already in force. They came into force on election day last week on Wednesday. And second of all, to challenge the current leadership of the IAAF because of what they're trying to do here. So the South African government is taking a very forward-looking... they've been quite proactive. Very proactive, yes.
Casta is a woman of few words. Have we had access to her since? What is her standpoint on this whole thing? Do we know?
You know, she is a woman of few words, and she hasn't been interviewed by anybody since this decision came out. She is, however, very active on social media. Anybody who follows her will see she tweets a lot in particular. Most of them are not very personal statements, but she makes these memes that say a lot without saying anything at all. But certainly from speaking to her and to some of the people who are close to her, the sense that we get is that she hasn't considered at this stage taking that medication. It's not something that she wants to do. It's not something she's prepared to do for her own body, and she's really prepared to stand up for the principle, because she knows, even though a lot of people feel that this is targeted at Caster Semenya, she feels that this is a much bigger principle than she has to stand for.
Yeah.
And she's been extraordinary through this whole process, where she's felt that it's a principle, and she's stronger than any person I know to have been able to deal with some of the criticisms and the abuse and
even
the
way
vitriol
back
that's been thrown at her over the last 10 years.
That's right.
And she's handled it with such classiness. She's amazing.
She's a tough girl. Thanks very much for that, Janet. That was Janet Whitton. She's our Deputy Sports Editor here at the SABC.